After being marked as a traitor by the unified Earth government, Catherine knew that if she had been found and caught, she would have been executed for treason. She knew that the Earth government, including United Nations Space Command, would send their best tracking team, Firestar Osiris, in order to track her down. And thanks to her extended knowledge of the Earth colonies in the galaxy, she knew exactly which one to avoid, which has a major military presence. But that doesn't mean that she could just go to a smaller outposts or smaller colonies. No, because she knew that eventually she would have been recognized even of those smaller colonies. She knew that her face would have been published on every single human colony. So she knew that she had to be in constant movement, but that also would have restraint of her resources. From time to time, for almost 6 months, she was forced to keep on herself constant movement. She only stopped at smaller outposts or smaller colonies, mostly farm colonies, only to get some supplies or some fuel. But since she was afraid that some of the people on the Navy's people on those colonies would immediately recognize her, so she didn't stay that long, for maybe only less than a day. Other than that, she kept on herself on the movement. After 6 months into hiding, she not only found out that Earth government had sent Firestar Osiris, but also had been hired multiple bounty hunters and mercenaries to find her. That scared her even more, and that made her decide that she had to keep constant moving more often. And that meant that she couldn't spend any much time on each planet. So she thought, what about if she could go to some other space stations or something too in order to get supplies of fuel? But that was another big risk. A lot of the space stations would have a constant movement of other civilians or even included a military presence. So that was one risk that she didn't want to do there. But she had to do sometimes that. Even if that's something that she noticed that people looked at her, she was immediately felt that she was recognized. But so far she hadn't even been recognized. But after seeing some of her constant movement, she had decided to stay in one place for a bit much more longer. She discovered a small planetoid far from any other human colonies or settlements in an area for at least several light years. But she knew that eventually that if someone would actually arrive in this system. So she had set up a small network of sensors throughout that particular system just to warn her if any ship had arrived. After being on that planetoid for about a few weeks, it only did not that she was not constant movement, it actually saved her fuel for once. But one day, suddenly, the alarm went off. A ship had just entered in the system. She was worried, but as one of the sensors didn't recognize the ship if it was a civilian or a military. But luckily for her, thanks to some extended knowledge, that was not a military ship. So that indicated that this was a civilian. But she didn't want to take the risk to be spotted, so she powered down her ship's life energy so much as possible. And luckily for her, ship was hiding in one of the planetoid's deep canyons. So maybe it's that the ship was deep enough so that the ship, if that strange ship would pass by the planetoid, it wouldn't detect her. But as the ship was getting closer, she immediately recognized, at least, that the design of it was a mercenary ship. This type of ship was often used by bounty hunters or mercenaries. So she knows this is actually one of those people that had been hired by the Earth government or United Nations Space Command in order to find her. And she knew that probably if they found her here, it's a big risk that she would be brought in for justice. So she then decided to power up all the ship's systems, and as the ship was not that far from the planetoid, she took off. She literally flew as fast as she could out of the planetoid, far away from the system. And this strange, the other mercenary ship discovered her and started fire upon her. Luckily, though, she was far distant from this mercenary ship. She thought maybe this ship was older model, would mean that they was not fast enough as hers. But luckily, unlucky for her, the mercenaries was able to catch up with her. And as she was putting out the coordinates through her slip space generator, the ship was impacted at least a few times back from behind, and she managed to enter the slip space. But only a few seconds later, she exited. She wondered maybe that the ship's slip space generator was damaged. But she was more worried if the mercenary ships would have found her, because only a few seconds would even been far enough for her to even had traveled even just 1 light year. But strange enough, on her sensors there were no signs of any alien ship whatsoever, but only a planet in front of her. Maybe that she had entered one of the other planets in that system. But suddenly, as she was waiting for her to be found but tracked by this mercenary ship, the ship's warning alarm shut off. It turned out that the engines at the back had been hit, severely damaged, and was overheating, since meaning the power generator in the ship was putting more energy towards the engines. But the engine was damaged, and since the ship couldn't release that energy in outbursts of a meaning of transportation, or the less outbursts of energy, it was only building up more and more and more. She tried to turn off the engines, but the command system had been damaged. There was no way for her to start turning off. And as it was doing that, the generator, that's the power generator, was also building up energy. And it started getting another warning alarm saying if she didn't have enough time, that the ship will explode with the next 30 seconds. And that wasn't enough time. But she managed to run so fast as she could to one of the escape pods. There was only 2 on board her ship. As she was just had left the ship, it exploded. She thought maybe that now she was safe from the explosion, but it wasn't. The ship's explosion caused some damage to the escape pod, and she was knocked out unconscious as the explosion shook the escape pod, made her fly towards one of the walls and knocked her out. At the same time, it was just that. The next moment when she woke up, she was in a bed. The last thing that she remembers, she was in the escape pod. She didn't know exactly what happened, except that she was followed by this mercenary ship, and that's it. She had no memories of how she ended up in this hospital bed, or she first believed that she may have been in some sort of medical care, but she wondered where. And she saw there were no people in the room until suddenly some strange people walked in with some of them was actually wearing some form of medical outfit or uniform, but at least 3 people, 2 men and a woman, was wearing some sort of armor. She didn't recognize this particular armor, and they saw that she was awake, and they start asking her, but there was a language that she didn't even recognize. So she tried to explain that she doesn't understand them, but it turns out they couldn't even understand her language. There was like a language barrier. Then she put her hand on herself, say that her name was Catherine. Catherine. So the others understand what that was, meaning that her name is Catherine. But since it was still a very much big language barrier, she didn't know exactly what else to do. So it turned out that what she believed at least, that these other 3 people were either security or maybe some other type of people. and she didn't know which planet she was on, and she wasn't confined or strained to her bed. As she tried once to leave, she realized that she couldn't. Turned out one of her legs was broken, and she couldn't leave the bed. And so she was confined at the hospital bed for at least a few days until the strange leader, or when she later found out was the leader of the people. She said that her name was Bo-Katan Kryse, but that was only that she could understand. Even that she and all the other doctors tried to talk to her, tried to get some information from her to where she's from, why she is on their world. But there was nothing else that she could do. And it turned out after a while, these two men came wearing armor, and they brought her to this place. When she looked out in the front of windows in this hovercraft, there was complete wasteland. There were some dome-shaped structures in the distance from each other. She may realize that maybe that she were on the planet that she was approaching. But as she was attending to this one of the domes, she was astonished to see how the interior and how much the people working and living as normal. She was astonished, and she later learned the name of the planet was Mandalore. And she was taken to this, at least what she believed was the capital or something. There seems to be quite important people there. She met up again with Bo-Katan. They were trying to communicate, but unfortunately there was nothing. There was even a protocol droid there, but a protocol droid couldn't even understand any single word from Catherine. Even when she tried writing her language, they had never seen that type of language before. Catherine realized this was not an Earth colony, because no knowledge, thanks to her extended knowledge of the other many Earth colonies, there was no one of them named Mandalore. She thought, maybe what if this was actually a long lost colony, or maybe there was actually a colony that had been reported in to unified Earth government. What if this wasn't one of those colonies that group of people had built up over 100 years and not even been found by the Earth government? And that can explain why the people they are humans, but they don't speak the language as her. Maybe that they had developed in their own culture, their own language. That would make sense in her opinion, but it doesn't add up in that. And after almost a month, Catherine had realized, or at least had understand now, completely of the language that would turn out to was Galactic Standard Basic, or Galactic Basic as she called it. Turned out now Bo-Katan and Catherine was able to communicate with each other more frequently, and Bo-Katan was quite astonished to see what she was told by Catherine, that she was from one world that Bo-Katan never even heard of. She even put in the name in a computer system on a database that contained a list of known planets in all the regions in the galaxy. Turned out there was no such planet. And it turned out after that Catherine had made some conclusion that when she was hit by the mercenary ship, and that when she was entered the sleep space, and even that it became unstable for some reason, and even if it was only for a few seconds, she must have had opened by unintentionally, unknowingly, a small rift that opened up to a potential traveling from one dimension to another. So she must have traveled to a form of another type of dimension or an ultimate universe. But she believed more as that the dimension is more perfectly sense. And that she had ended up in not only another dimension, but the whole complete galaxy. A galaxy of our people, our humans, but no one doesn't even know of her. So, for once, she didn't felt any worried. In fact, Bo-Katan and Catherine has started developing a good friendship. And they, of course, want to know more about each other's worlds and their cultures. But there was something about Catherine that Bo-Katan couldn't even point at. She was beautiful. But over time, as their friendship developing more and more closer, she even became one of Bo-Katan's technical or scientific advisor. Because she actually had provided some information of some new technology that could perhaps improve the Mandalorians, which later found out what they call themselves. And even now that Catherine's leg was healed, she was free to go when she wanted. But since she has no connection to anyone in this galaxy other than the Bo-Katan, she was offered even a ship so that she could travel anywhere in the galaxy she wanted. And Catherine decided to do that. But on her travels, there was only one thing that she couldn't stop thinking about. Bo-Katan. Even after she had been on traveling around in the galaxy, encountered dozens of different species. Thanks to Bo-Katan's knowledge, or at least a gift to her, was a small copy of a database that contained different languages, the different species, and lists of species numbers, and even number of planets with names, and which world that she should stay away from, and where planets were very friendly towards humans. But after almost 2 months of this travel, she started having a second thought. Despite her traveling around and come to many worlds that she had never even imagined. Like, she traveled to planet Kashyyyk to see these Wookiees with their giant trees, and even went to Coruscant, this a whole planet covered just one giant city. But Bo-Katan always was on her mind. She actually had realized that she had fallen in love with Bo-Katan. And so she decided the next time when she would have her ship refueled and some resupplies, she was heading back to Mandalore. She didn't want to tell Bo-Katan that she is coming because she wanted that to be as a surprise. So she did. She went over to Mandalore, and Bo-Katan was for sure surprised to see Catherine. She wasn't even realized that she was even back. But Catherine explained the reasons why she was back because she felt more home at Mandalore, despite only the for short time staying there. And the people there was always polite, very friendly, very open. So she decided to be Bo-Katan's scientific advisor once again. And only about having back for only a few weeks, she confessed her true feelings towards Bo-Katan, even though realizing that it might be a chance or a risk that Bo-Katan wasn't much anything the same gender as herself. But it was a worth risk to take though, she thought. And in fact, it was not unlike what she expected, but Bo-Katan explained that she also had been thinking of Catherine. Because during when she left, Catherine was always on her mind because she was a very unique person. From a whole different universe that unlike anyone she had ever met. In her mind, Catherine was like a true Mandalorian. And in fact, Mandalore was now that Catherine had chosen to be her new homeworld, well, at least adopted homeworld. She decided that she wanted to be a true Mandalorian. So, Bo-Katan taught her some of the Mandalorian combat styles, like hand-to-hand combat and training with blasters and all types of that. And she even had one of her own best pilots to train her the best way to fight in a fight with a true Mandalorian fighter. After months of that, she was now truly a Mandalorian. And during this time, Bo-Katan and Catherine actually had become as a true couple. During the breaks on her during Catherine's training to be as a Mandalorian, they actually went out several times to have dinners or just we even watched some horror videos in Catherine's new home. Their feelings for each other just only got deeper and deeper for each month that passed. There were a lot of this speculations within the Mandalorians that Catherine was only after the power that Bo-Katan had. But Catherine always explained to them that she is not into for much power at all. She doesn't want that type of power herself. But she said if that Bo-Katan wanted her to be a temporary leader for the whole world, for the people, she would. But only if Bo-Katan agreed. She really wanted not to be taking over the power from her. Because Bo-Katan has spent so much time to help her to get used to the whole new galaxy and all new lifestyle. Why would she jeopardize all that? Because especially now they have been a couple. Bo-Katan actually made Catherine as her second in command, or at least a third in command if her rankings. But after being on the Mandalore for about 3 years, Catherine, she actually proposed to Bo-Katan. She said yes immediately. They decided to have a small wedding in the next couple of months. During the time before the wedding itself, Catherine was very nervous, but she didn't have to, because she realized that her true love was actually with Bo-Katan. And they decided to have a small close wedding though. And after the wedding ceremony, at the wedding reception, or what she called the wedding party, it actually was a great time. All their friends could actually see how happy Bo-Katan were for once. They even left Mandalore for only like 2 weeks. They went to Coruscant to spend 2 weeks there as the honeymoon. But they came back to course. And after being married for about almost 2 years, they wanted to have their own family. And since Bo-Katan later found out one of her close friends, which has a daughter and a son, her friend had passed away in an accident. And since his children was now orphan, and she didn't want those children to be put in an orphanage. So she decided to take those children in and raise them in honor of their father. Catherine was actually not against the idea because she knew that it would have been hard for them. Because if they were being adopted by another family, there was a chance that the brother could have been separated from his sister. So they decided to adopt both of them. And Junior was just happy to have new parents. Even if it was just 2 mothers. Sure, it was still something to get used to. But most of all, they were happy. And after all this though, Catherine, she was just happy that she managed to escape those mercenaries years ago. If she had managed to end up in this new galaxy, she may not have found her true love. Bo-Katan, she was really happy that she had run into in Catherine. And that she is happy for. And this is how Bo-Katan Kryse and Catherine Halsey found their true love, got a family together. The